What happens when we begin to realize that the 200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed? Tune in to Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD, and join the conversation about how to heal our broken system to reverse our current health crisis. The entire world is looking for answers, and the truth is hidden in plain sight. Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time, when you can call in and ask the questions that matter most to you.
We're live.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Mylaine Riobe, and this is Awakened Wellness. Welcome. Today is April 7th, 2021, and we're live today. And I would love to hear any comments, take your calls as we're having our discussion today. Today's topic is why pandemics are on the rise, the real causes of pandemics that you should know to help protect yourself and your family and loved ones. So we're live today, so please give me a call. I'd love to hear from you. Our area code is 646-558-8656. That's 646-558-8656. Our meeting ID is 883-695-3587. And if you hit *9, you can raise your hand, to ask a question or make a comment. So I'd love to hear from you today. If you have any questions, please feel free to join us. So again, we're still, knee deep in our COVID pandemic. Although we do see some lights at the end of the tunnel, we're far from in the clear. So thankfully we have some vaccines out that will again, reduce the burden on our hospital systems, but we don't yet know if they're going to prevent infection from COVID. That's still up in the air. So we have to begin to ask ourselves, what happened? Why are we experiencing this tragedy for the past year, going on a year and a half, with no clear end in sight yet? And if we look a little bit closely, we hear a lot about the flu of 1918 as though that was the last time this happened. It was a monumental pandemic, but it was not the last epidemic that we had. We've had several in between the last century, pandemic and this one, COVID-19. And if we look at the statistics worldwide, we can actually see that epidemics are actually becoming much more frequent than they used to be. And so we have to begin to ask ourselves, why is this? And the irony is that just 2 years ago in 2018, the World Health Organization published a paper warning about the rise of pandemics. And this was literally 1 year before the COVID pandemic began. So, this pandemic should not have blindsided us the way that it did. And we really do have to ask, what happened, what went wrong, kind of do a bit of an autopsy, so to speak. But we don't necessarily have to do an autopsy. We can just look back at statistics globally and see. So in 2018, the World Health Organization published a paper. It was called Managing Epidemics: Key Facts About Major Deadly Diseases. And the head of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, wrote a wonderful paper basically outlining that epidemics are actually on the rise. And he warned the entire world to be prepared for the rise of epidemics, the increasing frequency and severity of epidemics. He made a couple of quotes, and I'd like to read them directly to you from the report. He said in this report, global health security is only as strong as its weakest link. No one is safe until everyone is safe. He went on to state, but it's not enough just to respond to outbreaks. We must do our best to prevent them by addressing the root cause of health insecurity, the lack of access of the most vulnerable people to essential health services. He lost me on that one. I don't necessarily agree with that statement, and I'll explain why. I don't think that's the ultimate root cause, but it is an important factor. It's not one to be ignored. He went on to say, ultimately, it's the absence of universal health coverage that is the greatest threat to health security. Universal health coverage and health security are two sides of the same coin, end quote. So it was a very well thought out paper, but I think the conclusion is just a little bit off, and I'd like to discuss that a little bit more. And while I agree with Dr. Ghebreyesus that health insecurity is caused by a lack of access to healthcare, I don't agree that it is the greatest threat, as he indicated there. How do we know that lack of access to healthcare is not the greatest threat to health security? We know that based on the fact that we have seen the countries with the best healthcare in the world get ravaged by COVID-19. France lost, I believe, almost 100,000 people in France so far. They are consistently ranked at the very top in terms of healthcare quality in the world. And they were not spared from COVID being a pandemic in their country. And then we see countries that have literally almost no healthcare, like such as India, or we think they have no healthcare is what I should say. Countries that we consider to be quote unquote third world, like India and Brazil, who had fewer COVID cases than we did here in the United States and fewer deaths than we did here in the United States. So clearly this is not an issue of lack of access to healthcare. So in my opinion, what do I think is the greatest threat to health security? I think it's more basic than that. I think it is our fundamental misunderstanding of what the word prevention actually means. And that's a big problem. There's a lot of confusion and misinformation around the word prevention. And therein lies the flaw of our current healthcare system. So we could double and triple access to healthcare all around the globe, but if that healthcare system is not preventive by its very nature, it won't prevent pandemics. And our healthcare system, and unfortunately, the world has adopted our similar model, and none of the models throughout the world are preventive. And so I don't agree that if we were to simply put everyone under universal healthcare, that would fix our problems. Our problem is fundamentally that we don't have a healthcare system. We have a sick care system. We have a system that does not prevent diseases in place. So making it more accessible is not going to fix the problem. So what is prevention, right? So we can start by asking, what is not prevention, right? Vaccines are not prevention. Again, we're seeing this with COVID-19 vaccines. They do not prevent infection. They prevent death from infection. That is not prevention, right? We learn in medical school that there are two types of prevention. We learn that there is primary and secondary prevention. And unfortunately, we're only using what we described as secondary prevention in the real world. Primary prevention is preventing the disease itself. Secondary prevention is, oops, we missed the boat. Now the person is sick. So now we're trying to prevent death. We're trying to prevent that person from dying. That's secondary prevention, which is really not, in fact, prevention at all. That's early diagnosis and treatment. But for some reason, we learned to call it prevention and then we applied it. And so fundamentally, people have a misunderstanding that vaccines are preventive. They're not preventive. Fundamentally, we have a misunderstanding that antibiotics are preventive. They are not preventive. We use antibiotics after someone gets sick. That is not prevention. That's early diagnosis and treatment. So we have to start using the right terms. Often words are misused and then they become adopted in their misuse. And we start to say the word as though it means what it doesn't mean. And we really do need to rein that in if we're really going to get to the heart of this problem. So I disagree that universal access is the solution. We have to first have a healthcare system that prevents diseases. Then we make that universally available. Now we have a plan. So again, while the fundamental premises are true, and I agree wholeheartedly that everyone needs access to care, we need to actually have a healthcare program for them to sign up for. And we simply don't. We just don't have that. Now, that's not to say that we have, we have saved a lot of people from dying of COVID. Many doctors and nurses and healthcare workers have died during this. Even the best, most competent healthcare professionals, doctors, nurses, technicians, cannot make up for when you're practicing in a system that does not prevent diseases. It becomes more quote unquote expensive to keep going down. They have just not reached pandemic proportion like COVID did, but we've seen that we forgot about already. And then there was the Zika scare of a couple years ago. And then we're seeing epidemics that we thought we had under control coming back. So we see yellow fever resurging. We see cholera and plague coming back. And so these things that we thought we put to bed and that we would never see again, they're starting to come up again, despite vaccines, despite antibiotics, despite all of the things that we think are going to fix our problems. They just keep coming back. And now they're coming back a little bit with a vengeance. And again, we have to ask why, like what's happening? And we're going to talk about that in depth today, because we really do need to come up with a better plan than the one we've been using since the latter half of the last century. So back in 1969, we had a Surgeon General here in the United States named Dr. Jesse Steinfeld. And he unfortunately thought that the solution to our problems was going to be antibiotics and vaccines. And he made the statement that we were going to close the book on the problem of infectious diseases. And that was back in 1969. And here we are in 2021, and we are very far from closing the book on infectious diseases. In fact, infectious diseases might be closing the book on us if we're not careful. And so, again, our system has been fundamentally flawed for about 200 years. And so we keep coming up with these flawed solutions and thinking we're going to be done with a problem, and then it just comes back. And so while vaccines and antibiotics pushed infections away temporarily, because again, we're reacting to infections, we're not preventing them. And so we'll see an epidemic start to come up, and we'll employ methods that we think are going to suppress it or get rid of it. But it doesn't actually get rid of it. It just really does suppress it. So what it does is it lowers the numbers, and then we lose focus and we move on to the next shiny object. And then the numbers start to creep up on us again. And again, that's because we're not fundamentally preventing anything. So vaccines and antibiotics, again, while they appear to be effective in terms of ridding us of epidemics, what they really do fundamentally is they kind of set us up for the next epidemic. Antibiotics are well known to suppress immunity. So again, it's like you're robbing from Paul to give to Peter. You're suppressing an acute infection for the moment, and you're buying time. But what antibiotics do is they actually suppress immunity. So they suppress the bug you're trying to kill, and they suppress you at the same time. And then they leave you suppressed. So we don't actually ever recover from having taken an antibiotic, and that's the problem. Once the antibiotic has its effects on our bodies, there is no innate ability for our bodies to recover from that exposure. And so our immune system remains suppressed. And we see this also in cancer literature. So antibiotics are now being linked to cancer because cancer is ultimately an immune problem. It's the failure of our immune system to detect a cell that divided improperly and became cancerous. Normally, our immune system should detect those cells immediately and kill them. And it's only if our immune system is not functioning that that cell is allowed to live, and to the point where it multiplies into a visible tumor in about 5, 6, or 7 years. And so cancer is an immune system failure. And we're beginning to see the links between antibiotic use and cancer. Some antibiotics increase the risk of cancer by up to 17%. And so this link is starting to become more and more proven. It's not a direct link because it takes time, so again, it's not a direct assault. We don't use an antibiotic today and get cancer tomorrow. It's years later. But we'll talk about today how antibiotics actually cause immune system suppression and even cancer as we move through. So again, the answer is not to make a flawed healthcare system more accessible. It is first to create a better healthcare system that our doctors and our nurses and our other, ancillary healthcare providers can use, and so can therefore extend to our patients, and they can have benefit of using a different healthcare system. In 2014, the American Academy of Physician Specialties, which was established in 1960, formally recognized the field of integrative medicine as a medical specialty. And this was a monumental thing, because in order for the American board to recognize you as a specialty, you have to have an overwhelming body of evidence to show that that system works. So they're the same board that says cardiology is a medical specialty or gynecology is a medical specialty. And in order for that to happen, you have to have a body of evidence, a body of medical literature that shows the utility of that particular field. And so integrative medicine was recognized in 2000 in scientific data that show that it works. Its focus is to prevent, but its main focus is to treat the underlying root causes of symptoms in order to prevent diseases. And integrative medicine is a combination of different systems of medicine that use energy-based systems, for example, such as traditional Chinese medicine or Ayurveda. Yoga can be categorized as integrative. Tai Chi can be categorized, or Qigong can be categorized as integrative. Many modalities can be categorized as integrative. Probably the most famous system is functional medicine, which is kind of a European concept, but it is holistic in the sense that it also looks for root causes of symptoms and conditions to treat. And so while the paradigm of our allopathic model is to prevent death from disease by treating diseases and identifying them, integrative medicine's paradigm is to prevent the disease itself. And so it would be better suited as a model of primary care to bring this cycle of epidemics under control, so to speak, because it would look fundamentally at things that are causing epidemic. We call SARS-CoV-2 as the cause of COVID-19. Integrative medicine would go a step further and say the immune system to defend the body against all viruses, including COVID-19. So integrative medicine just goes fundamentally further to the actual root causes. So the cause of to prevent COVID-19 from accessing us.
200-year experiment we've called the American healthcare system has been emerging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Radio Network invites you in for this dynamic, forward-thinking show.
Ever wonder what it's like to have your own radio show? Well, wonder no longer, because you can dip into the radio airwaves by being host for the day on syndicated Dream Vision 7 radio network. It's a fabulous way to get your radio feet wet. It's an opportunity to market your business, modality, or book. Have a guest, mention a sponsor, and take callers. Or you may want to facilitate a lesson by going solo. It's up to you. Listeners can be online, mobile, in cars with Bluetooth, or listen through Amazon's Echo by asking, Alexa, play Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. For more details, go to dreamvision7radio.com and click on Host for the Day.
Omega Institute, offering workshops, retreats, and online learning dedicated to awakening the best in the human spirit. For over 40 years, Omega has seen more than 1 million people come through its doors to grow, learn, and find a greater sense of purpose. With over 350 workshops to choose from, Omega offers something for everyone. Located in Rhinebeck, New York, just 90 miles north of New York City, Omega's natural environment and quiet pace allow for extraordinary experiences to unfold. Learn more at eomega.org or call 877-944-2002. Again, 877-944-2002.
Delight your kids with an enchanting journey by reading the Paper Doll Kids children's book by Deborah Beauvais and Janine Sullivan. There's even a catchy tune, Kids for Love Song, produced by Bob Sherwood and sung by kids just like yours. The story weaves around 7 paper dolls flying around the world doing good deeds as they bring important attention to our endangered animal friends. There's even a magical ring with a universal message. Kids become interested in service projects, action through compassion, and planting seeds that nurture positive change. The Paper Doll Kids and Kids for Love Song are a production of the Kids for Love Project. Get the book now on Amazon Kindle and the song on CD Baby or iTunes.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
We're back.
Thank you, Rachel. All right, so we're back. Today we're discussing why pandemics are on the rise and what are the real causes that you should know so that you can protect yourself, your family, and your loved ones moving forward. So we ended on discussing that in integrative medicine, we believe that the COVID pandemic's root cause is an immune system failure of the human being, and not necessarily the virus itself, right? In medical school, we learn that whenever something is trying to access the body, like a pathogen, we call viruses and bacteria, fungus, parasites, we call them all pathogens. When a pathogen is trying to invade the body, it has to be stronger than the host to get in. So the host being you, the person, you have to actually be weaker than the bug for the bug to be able to access you. So it's kind of a competition, right? The stronger of the two wins. And it's really that simple. It's not more complicated than that. So if your immune system is weaker and it allows the virus to enter, then the virus will simply enter. But if your immune system is strong, the virus has no access point. And so, you will not be infected. Now that doesn't mean that we don't all get sick at some point, right? Because we all have immune suppression at some point. If we go through a stressful period of time in our lives, we go through extended periods of sleep deprivation, our immune system will drop temporarily. And so we've all been hit with, various infections from time to time. But we should be able to recover quickly and move about our lives if we have a functioning immune system. So the idea that almost 3 million people worldwide have died of an infection tells us that there's something going on globally that's affecting our immunity. And again, we know, in the spiritual world, we know that we're all connected. But we kind of miss that boat in the physical world, right? We think that things that are happening all the way around the world, that can't get to me. I'm safe over here, and that's just not true, right? The planet rotates like 18, 1,000 kilometers an hour around its axis, and so we're sharing air, we're sharing water, we're sharing everything. We share soil. The water that's in the Atlantic Ocean ends up in the Pacific at some point, right? There are jet streams that carry these things around. And so no one is isolated. And so there's something going on globally, that is impacting our immunity as a species that we need to look at. So the fundamental question is, why is our immunity so weak? And it's already known why our immunity is weak. This isn't something we need to actually study. The studies have already been done. They're just not discussed. So there are medical studies everywhere and scientific studies everywhere that we can all find that will tell us these things. Number one is antibiotics weaken immunity. There are numerous studies to show this. And we can just think it through. It's really just playing dot to dots, right? We take an antibiotic. It doesn't necessarily discriminate what it wants to kill. So we may have an idea that we want to kill a bacteria that's in the bladder causing an infection. Perhaps it's called E. coli or Klebsiella, and we give an antibiotic that we know is effective for that particular bug. But the antibiotic isn't going to simply hunt down that one bacteria to kill it. It's going to kill an entire class or multiple classes of bacteria that E. coli happens to be a part of. And so again, it's like taking a sledgehammer to kill an ant, as opposed to strategically killing the ant itself. And so antibiotics are somewhat indiscriminatory in terms of what they kill. Now, there are classes of antibiotics. So there are antibiotics that will kill what we call gram-positive bacteria or gram-negative bacteria. So they won't kill all bacteria, but they'll kill a large number. In our gastrointestinal system, particularly in the large intestine, we have 100 trillion bacteria that belong there. They are part of our human body. And I think at some point they'll probably be classified as an organ. They're that important. They are responsible for 3.4 million genes that are living on us, basically. And when we use antibiotics, we kill an untold number of those bacteria that we actually need to live. The bacteria, we call it the microbiome. And because of the microbiome, those 100 trillion bacteria, the human gastrointestinal system was deemed the most complex ecosystem on planet Earth. And that's saying a lot, right? We think of the most complex ecosystem on planet Earth as like the Amazon, but it's not. It's actually your gut. That's how complicated the gut is and how important it is. And antibiotics really negatively impact the gastrointestinal system as a whole through their destruction of the microbiome. And we get the microbiome at birth. So when we pass through our mother's birth canal through the vagina has a microbiome. And those bugs, basically colonize us. The fluid that we drink as we're going through the birth canal is teeming with bacteria. When we breastfeed as infants, there are good bacteria that come through the breast milk of our mothers. And that's how we are colonized as babies. And so that's how we develop our immune system. And there have been studies to show that babies that are born by cesarean section don't have a healthy microbiome as compared to those delivered by vaginal birth. Now, of course, cesarean sections are absolutely necessary in certain cases. We used to have a 50% maternal mortality rate before the cesarean section. So, it's not that it's an unnecessary procedure. It is a necessary procedure. However, it does kind of set the infant back a little bit, right? And there's not really a well-known way to recover the microbiome once it's lost, except possibly through a procedure called a fecal transplant, which is not broadly available. And so it's really hard to recover from antibiotics for that reason. The other reason our immunity is somewhat destroyed by antibiotics is because our immune system cells also live among the microbiome in the large intestine. So 80% of our immune system is housed in the gastrointestinal system. So when we kill off the bacteria that live there, we destabilize that environment and we destabilize those immune cells. And so that weakens immunity. And so that's how antibiotics weaken immunity and cause cancer, because that same immune system that protects you from bugs also protects you from cancer. Steroids such as prednisone weaken immunity. And unfortunately, prednisone is being used a lot more frequently, especially for upper respiratory infections, just to calm the inflammatory responses. But unfortunately, that it comes at a cost. It also weakens immunity. Steroids such as prednisone are also used for asthma. And what's interesting about asthma is Mount Sinai actually did a study with the University of Beijing back at least 10 or 20 years ago. They studied a Chinese herb that was compared to prednisone, and they showed that the Chinese herb was just as effective for children with asthma as prednisone, and that the Chinese herb had absolutely no side effects. So prednisone is another, or steroids, if you will, are another cause. Now, not all steroids are prednisone. So prednisone is particularly dangerous because it's 40 times more potent than our own body's steroid response to infection would be. So when something's that much more potent than what we would mount on a normal day, it suppresses our systems and it kind of takes over. And so if you use prednisone too much, your own stress response systems will become suppressed. We call that adrenal fatigue in integrative medicine or functional medicine. To an extreme, it's called Addison's disease in our allopathic model. And then anti-inflammatory drugs, right? We think things like taking ibuprofen over the counter is fairly, benign. Oh, I have a headache, let me take ibuprofen. It suppresses immunity. It prevents healing as well, because our immune system is a healer. It heals our tissues. So we need an immune response to heal our tissues. And so with chronic anti-inflammatory use, we actually see an increased risk of strokes, and we begin to see loss of cartilage in our joints. So it actually destroys the joints rather than protects the joints. So again, it masks your pain if you have pain in your joint, but that comes at a cost if you use it too much. And of course, there's the gastrointestinal ulcers and things that can come from using ibuprofen frequently. But a lot of people don't know that it actually suppresses the immune system, and it makes you more vulnerable to infections because of that. And we actually did get a hint of that with COVID. There was some talk about avoiding anti-inflammatories early on during the pandemic. There are also immune suppressing prescription drugs that we use, in particular for autoimmune conditions, such as Xeljanz, Humira, and Enbrel. And again, they will suppress the immune system to keep you from having pain. And in the case of, for example, rheumatoid arthritis, it can prevent the inflammation that will cause deformation of joints. But again, it comes at a cost. It suppresses the immune system. So it makes you more vulnerable to infections and even potentially to cancer, although there's no direct link yet. And then the obvious ones, chemotherapy obviously suppresses immunity. And people think, oh, I'm done with my chemo, so my immune system should be all better now. But again, the body doesn't have an innate way to just recover like we think it does. And so while the side effects of chemotherapy may go away, that doesn't mean the effects of chemotherapy went away. So again, your body does not like to be too unstable. And so if it's experiencing a significant symptom, it's going to do whatever it can to make that symptom go away. And it's going to imbalance itself in a different way. And in Chinese medicine, we call that pathological balance. So it's like an imbalanced balance. It's, again, doing two wrongs to make a right. So it's not that we fixed the problem, it's that the body was able to settle itself into a less dysfunctional state, but you still have the root cause at play. And so people don't actually recover from chemotherapy. The body just finds a means of resetting itself so that they don't feel the same side effects, for too long. And so the weakened immunity stays with you. Nutrient deficiencies weaken immunity as well. So it's very well established that vitamins A, D, E, C, B6, folic acid, so make sure I don't miss any, and the minerals zinc, copper, selenium, and iron. Any deficiencies in any of those particular vitamins, even if they're mild, weakens your immune system, because your immune cells rely on those vitamins to function as immune cells. And so in our allopathic model, we don't have any testing to tell you if your immune system is actually functioning. We do have blood work that we do where we get blood counts. So we'll give you your white blood cell counts, your red blood cell counts. We'll give you the counts of your neutrophils and your lymphocytes and other immune cells. But those are just numbers of cells. They don't actually tell you if they're working. So we make an assumption, well, my white blood cell count is normal, therefore my immune system must be normal. And that's not true. It just means your immune cells are in the building, but are they working, right? So you can have a factory full of employees, but are they working, right? Are they all asleep at their desks, or are they actually working? And so we don't have a test for that in our allopathic model. We do in the integrative world. So there are tests that will measure if your immune cells are actually functioning. And so they may be in the building, but if they're missing vitamins A, D, E, C, B6, folic acid, and the minerals zinc, selenium, copper, and iron, they won't be functioning. And so you'll be susceptible to infection. Another problem that we have is that the CDC, or the Centers for Disease Control, states that only 10% of the US population has nutrient deficiencies. And that's an astounding number because it seems extremely low. I have never tested anyone who had a normal nutrient count. And so I can't imagine that the number is actually 10%. And so we have to ask ourselves, how'd they get this number? Where did they come up with this 10%? Because it just doesn't sound right, right? And when you go and you look at the methodology that they use to come up with that number, they use blood work to figure that out. And, we talk about blood work a lot on our podcast, and I have an entire chapter devoted to it in my new book coming out. It's just not accurate. Blood work is not telling you what's functioning in your body. It's telling you what's present in the bloodstream and is being transported from one group of cells to another group of cells. But until it gets inside the cells, until those nutrients access your cells, get in there and get utilized, they're not functioning. And so blood work gives you a very falsely normal sense that everything's okay when it's not. And so I was happy to see that the World Health Organization actually published a paper, and it was only on folic acid that they did this, but it's at least a start. They published a paper that showed that if you check cellular levels of folic acid, you will get an idea that maybe all the other vitamins might fall in line with the same logic. They just haven't addressed that piece yet. So they say, okay, we can measure cellular levels for folic acid, but for all the rest, we'll keep checking blood levels. And so that 10% is obviously skewed, because if they were to check cellular levels of all 33 of the nutrients, they would see that many more than 10% of our population is nutrient deficient. If I had to guess a number, I would say 70% of our population is nutrient deficient. We're blessed, most of us, 90% of us in this country are blessed to have food on the table every day, and sadly, 35 million of us are not that fortunate, right? But even the 90% of us that are that fortunate, when we actually look at the food sitting on the table, we have to ask ourselves, is that actually food? And the answer is usually no, it is organic. And even then, we're not in the clear because, again, we completely isolate out the organic food supply. Now, it's oftentimes those vitamins are not natural vitamins, they're artificial vitamins.
Experiment we've called the American healthcare system has failed. Learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, when you can call in and ask Dr. Mylaine the questions that matter most to you. Dr. Mylaine is the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. For more information, visit RIOBE integrativemedicine.com. Dream Vision 7 Radio Network invites you in for this dynamic, forward-thinking show.
Edecia is a U.S. nonprofit dedicated to the dream of ending childhood malnutrition for millions of children around the world through the manufacture of Plumpy Nut and other nutrient-rich, peanut-based, ready-to-use foods. Edecia has already delivered life and hope to nearly 1 million children in over 26 developing countries. To find out how you can join Edecia's dream of ending childhood malnutrition, please visit edeciaglobal.org.
What if dreams can diagnose your life? What if we can meet the love of our life in dreams? Join host Kat O'Keefe-Canavis, the #1 internationally best-selling author of Dreams That Can Save Your Life, written with Duke University medical doctor Larry Burke. Dreaming Healing is where we'll explore dreams, research, and interpret dreams from you, the caller. Dreaming Healing shows can be heard every Tuesday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern, with live shows on the first and third evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific Time on syndicated Dream Vision 7 Radio Network. Come live your dreams out loud with Kat.
Are you searching for a way to help create global change? Dream Vision 7 Radio Network's vision is to have an eclectic group of radio hosts dedicated to educating, enlightening, and helping humankind with positive messages and tools that enhance lives using different modalities and programs. If you would like to join our team and help illuminate the universe, call Deborah at 508-226-1723 or Deborah at dreamvision7radio.com.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment. Breathe, relax, and enjoy. Let life flow.
And we're back live with the doctor.
Thank you, Rachel. So I have clients ask me all the time, well, how do I avoid using antibiotics? They'll say, well, I was really sick. I had a really bad cold and I went to urgent care and that's what was given. And the answer is you don't need antibiotics for a cold, right? There are many, many other modalities that you can use that are more effective than antibiotics, and the truth is antibiotics don't treat viruses. Antivirals treat viruses, and we don't have very many antivirals in our allopathic model. But we do in other systems of medicine. So in functional medicine, we have natural antivirals. In Chinese medicine, we have natural antivirals that are more harmonious with nature. They're not artificial. They will not damage the immune system. If anything, they'll build up the immune system. And so there are so many other options that people just don't know they have. So when my clients catch a cold, I ask them to call me right away. And sometimes I'll give them herbs just to have at home, just in case, especially if they are, if they are prone to catching colds. So there are things you can just have on your shelf that if you start them soon enough, you'll kind of thwart the cold, or it'll run it, you'll recover much faster from it, or you won't get it at all. And so there are so many other alternatives of things that can be used. It's just a matter of letting people know. And again, the best way to know is to be under the care of a board certified integrative medical doctor. or a doctor of Oriental medicine who is, a doctor of Chinese herbology. On your own, I just don't think people can really make their way through it. There's just too much going on, And so back to the gastrointestinal system, it is the cornerstone of health. And because globally, since the Industrial Revolution, we have toxins in the atmosphere, toxins in the water, toxins in the soil. We cannot isolate ourselves from these toxins. We think our skin is a barrier, but that's not true. It's not a barrier. Things come right through your skin. You inhale them, you swallow them. They come in through your ears. They're coming in through your eyes. So you can't isolate yourselves from toxins. It's not possible. So we have to keep assessing what's going on in the gastrointestinal system. How healthy is it? And how do we restore it back to health? So we need to identify some things. First of all, do you have any gastrointestinal symptoms? Anything like bloating that's persistent or long-term, nausea. Loose stools is a big one. People think, oh, my stools are loose, but I didn't think anything of it because my colonoscopy was normal, nothing was found, right? Well, that's a major symptom, right? I always tell people your body has better things to do than to give you useless symptoms, right? So even one symptom alone that the body gives you is critically important, because if you can identify why you're having it and correct it, you will save yourself from getting sick. You'll save yourself from a disease down the road. And we have a tendency in our culture to normalize our symptoms because we keep going to the doctor and getting evaluated and we're told everything is fine. So we begin to normalize our symptoms. And I think that's very dangerous. I think it was Johns Hopkins University or NYU. I apologize. I can't remember which. They conducted a survey. I'm pretty sure it was Johns Hopkins. 74% of Americans have a gastrointestinal symptom. And if you have a gastrointestinal symptom, you have a gastrointestinal problem. The question is, can allopathic medicine find it or not? And again, if it's not visible on a colonoscopy or an endoscopy where they put a camera down through the mouth and into the gut that way, the answer is no. In integrative medicine, we have all kinds of testing to find out what's going on in the gastrointestinal system that cannot be found through allopathic medicine. So we can tell you if you have an infection in the small intestine. We can tell you if you have an infection in the large intestine. We can tell you if you have malabsorption. We can tell you if your gut leaks. We can look at the microbiome and tell you if it's healthy and functioning or not. We can look at your immune system function and tell you if it's functioning normally or not. These things are just not found in allopathic medicine. And then more importantly, there's intervention available that's natural, that will help restore the gastrointestinal system. So while we can't control the environment per se, we have some control, right? We can control what we bring in and out of our homes, what we put on our skin, what we wash our clothes with, and what we eat to some extent, but we can't completely isolate ourselves. But what we can do is continue to restore the body despite the toxins, and that's what I teach my clients the most is you don't have to be a victim to what's going on outside. You can protect yourself in many more ways than we're taught. And so through the use of traditional Chinese medicine, through the use of functional medicine, we can come up with treatment solutions that will eliminate gut symptoms, and I learned this lesson with a patient recently. Not that I didn't learn it before, but it was just made more evident, right? She had diarrhea for years before she came to see me, and it was really bad. It was affecting her life. She was exhausted. We were able to get it under control within about 6 months of her starting her treatment plan. And, now she basically has no loose stools at all, but she was already well on her way to having a heart attack by the time she walked into my office. And it was very fortunate that we sent her, she and I agreed that she would go see a cardiologist, because she told me she was having a little shortness of breath while she was running through an airport recently. And I'm like, you shouldn't have shortness of breath just because you're, running through the airport. I don't know that that's normal. And so I asked her to go see a cardiologist, and she ended up having a 95% occlusion of the widowmaker artery in her heart, which is the left anterior descending artery. So she was like potentially days from having a heart attack, potentially fatal. And I link it back to this diarrhea that she was having, because she also had numerous vitamin deficiencies, and she was on IV nutrition. We were able to restore her numbers and thankfully catch things before she actually had a heart attack. So she was able to have a stent placed, and so now she's much better. But this is just how dangerous having a gut symptom can be. And that was her only real symptom, right? So just to emphasize just how important the gastrointestinal system is, and I'm going to continue to talk about this in future podcasts and empower you, hopefully, to look at your own health very, very differently. I invite you to pre-order my book. It's coming out this month. I'm really excited. Faith, Fearlessly Affirming and Intending to Transform Health will be out this month on the 23rd of April. You can get the first 3 chapters for free by going to my website. It's Riobe, integrativemedicine.com. Riobe is spelled Riobe. If you pre-order a copy of your book now, you'll get 20% off. And I have workshops that I'm also creating where we will review the book together so you can really get a lot out of the book itself. It's packed with information about how we got into this mess and how we can get out of this mess together, looking in a different direction. So I wish you continued blessings. Please be safe. And until next time, thank you so much for listening.
Join us next time on Awakened Wellness with Mylaine Riobe, MD, to learn how spirituality, ancient traditions, and cutting-edge science are merging to create a new paradigm of wellness. Awakened Wellness airs every Wednesday at 12 a.m. and 12 p.m. Eastern Time, with live video shows every first and third Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern of each month. Meanwhile, you can join our Facebook page at facebook.com/awakenedwellness and let us know what you'd like to discuss on future episodes. Dr. Mylaine is the medical director of the Riobe Institute of Integrative Medicine in Jupiter, Florida. For more information, visit riobeintegrativemedicine.com. This show is part of the Dream Vision 7 radio network.
This is Dream Vision 7 Radio Network, uniting mankind with universal love. Our shows are created from the heart, bringing each listener to a place of divine enlightenment.